Welcome to CNN Money Switzerland. It is Friday, the 5th of June. I'm Ana Maria Montero with your headlines today. Starting off with some good news, if you have plans to travel from Switzerland to any of the EU countries, Iceland, Liechtenstein, or Norway, or the UK even, the Swiss Federal Council announced today that they will open the borders to all of these countries as of June the 15th. And yes, that does include Italy, which earlier this week was deemed still closed until further notice. The Federal Council's line corresponds to that of many European countries that have expressed a wish to return to normality and lift controls at the European internal borders. Meanwhile, also better than expected news for the US economy today. The unemployment rate surprisingly fell to 13.3% in May as the economy gained 2.5 million jobs, rebounding from April's drastic losses when a revised 20.7 million jobs vanished. The unemployment rate last month soared to 14.7% as businesses shut down during the coronavirus lockdown, leading economists to expect historic losses in May. But instead, the gradual reopening of the economy actually added new jobs rather than eliminating further positions. And also today, the Federal Council confirmed the board of directors of Innosuisse, an organization whose mission it is to promote science-based innovation in the interest of business and society. They re-elected André Kudelski as president of the board, along with all 6 of the previous members for the term from 2021 to 2024. All 7 representatives hail from the sectors of science and business. And to finish up, oil prices rose to a 3-month high ahead of OPEC meeting. Anticipation that OPEC and allied countries will extend record production cuts through July is sending oil prices higher, with Brent crude futures, the global benchmark, rising above $41 a barrel for the first time since early March. And European stocks got a boost from the ECB's latest stimulus plan. The 600 billion euro addition to its emergency stimulus package brings the European Central Bank's total purchasing program to 1.35 trillion euros. And now an exclusive interview with CNN Money Switzerland. Former Nestlé chairman and CEO Peter Brabeck talks about his battle against coronavirus, which ended with spending more than 2 weeks in intensive care. As he tells Andreas Schaffner, "I have been through tough fights in my life, but this is one of the tougher ones." Let's take a listen.
How do you feel? How are you when it comes to your health?
Well, first of all, I must say I'm now feeling very, very well. But I spent more than 2 weeks in the intensive station and afterwards 3 weeks in rehabilitation clinic. And it was a tough fight. I have gone through several fights in my life, but this was one of the more tougher ones because I got the feeling that the virus is, first of all, very aggressive, at least for my age group. And secondly, it is a virus that doesn't give in very easily. So 2 weeks in intensive station is a long period of time. But as you can see afterwards, everything went fine, and now we are back again.
How would you describe the virus? Everybody talks, it's like a flu, but how does it really feel?
Well, I think it's exactly this. It feels like a flu. And as a matter of fact, I went the first time to the hospital. I had 37.2 degrees, and the hospital would not even make the test on me. They said, no, you have just the flu, you go home. I went home. Only 5 days later, it was so bad that then they accepted me in the hospital. So it is like a flu in the beginning. Then afterwards, of course, you come all the complications, things like this.
But there's no treatment?
There is no specific treatment. There is then antivirus medicaments in the market. They tried one on me. It had a huge side effect, which was very negative, so we had to stop immediately. And so basically, it's your body fighting the virus. There is nobody else that can help you. And it's a strong fight.
So you, of course, even your connections, you were sitting on boards of pharmaceutical companies, nothing helped there.
No, not this time. Last time it helped, this time it didn't, but that's okay.
The coronavirus pandemic has exposed the cracks in the financial sustainability of the culture scene, says Nico Daswani, head of arts and culture at the World Economic Forum. After months of slumping ticket sales and canceled events, cultural institutions are pivoting to digital channels and rethinking the place of creatives. As he tells my colleague Olivia Chang, it brings a whole new dimension to our experience of culture.
Nico, throughout this whole time, we have been seeing virtual museums, shows, and concerts. Do you think that some people are just getting too used to the fact that they can watch everything online from the comfort of their home?
I don't think anyone will get too used to that. I think that if we've seen anything, is we've realized, most people have realized, how culture really is oxygen for society. I think most of us have longed and have missed the collective experience of being together at a movie theater, to being in a museum, seeing a show. But I think it is a new reality. It is bringing a whole new dimension to our experience of culture, and that is changing how cultural institutions are thinking about their place in the broader cultural ecosystem. One thing I think that's notable is and that many cultural institutions have started to realize, or certainly many have repositioned themselves around the centrality of the artist. All of this content that we've missed, or that we're now going to online, is created by artists, and we've started to, this COVID crisis has made visible a lot of the cracks in the financial sustainability for everyone in this model. So there's a lot of soul searching amongst cultural institutions to make sure that the cultural ecosphere, the cultural products and the experiences that we love so much, benefit the artists that are at the very center of creating them as much as everybody else.
And speaking of this new dimension, I mean, cultural institutions have really had to dig into their, shall I say, digital toolkits during this time, whether this be through online viewings or VR, for example. What have you seen personally that have been some creative ways in trying to attract new audiences?
Well, you can take a broad understanding of culture. You will have seen, for example, Airbnb doing online virtual experiences for people who couldn't host people anymore, but were then deploying their talents online. And you can take a class with Argentinian tango with a dancer somewhere in Argentina. So people have, out of necessity, but also out of a sheer sense of creativity, tried to adapt to this. Some of the cultural institutions have been on the forefront. Many people were already thinking about hybrid events, sometimes art fairs, hybrid events, as they started thinking about their own carbon footprint. Many art institutions, art foundations have realized for a long time it's not sustainable to fly from this art fair to that art fair. And so they've been trying to look at their own carbon footprint and think in ways that were more creative. So it's been great, because not only has it made the online creativity more visible, it's just spurred more creativity in general about the future for cultural institutions. And one of the questions that we've been posing to our partners, who are really across the world, is, what could we do now that we could not do before? What are some of the perennial roadblocks to making the cultural institutions more inclusive, to making them more diverse, to making them in a way more spaces of creation than only exposition? What are some of the ways that this moment in time is allowing us to rethink entirely?
Right, but going online, is that really enough? Because let's face it, some events just work much better in person than through a screen.
Look, I think the human need to assemble will probably be there forever. Being together, having these moments of awe, collective experience, having that moment of sharing that is intangible, that you really, whether you know it or not, has shaped your life. One of some of these defining moments that shape our lives, that shape how we see the world, how we understand the world.
You've talked about some of the cracks that this crisis has exposed. What kind of cultural institutions do you think will have a harder time in recovering from the crisis?
Look, the cultural sector, for the most part, is based on a non-profit sector is a non-profit, and it's been clear for many years that it's not necessarily sustainable. So you have institutions where ticket sales, for example, to festivals, will be maybe 50% of the income of that institution. That's no longer a viable institution for them for the future. You have festivals in Australia, for example, right now, who have realized obviously it's quite difficult to not just bring audiences but artists, international artists, to come into Australia. So they're thinking about nurturing local talents. This has been a moment of pivot for them to think, well, if it's going to be very difficult for anyone to come to Australia right now, how do we make sure that we are creating an ecosystem that's much more embedded in the local fabric, the social fabric? And so there's more and more thinking about how cultural institutions then integrate also with other sectors, so that they're responding together in a holistic approach to the socio-economic dynamics of their neighborhoods and of their communities.
And where do you see the players within this coming in the picture? For example, the musicians, the actors, the museum guides, who cannot earn any income during this whole time. Where do they fit into this broader picture of having a more financially sustainable future for the culture scene?
Look, let's not forget, the artists are at the core of this, and for too long we've seen now, and we're seeing it very clearly, that artists have been affected by this in ways, in much more than the institutions themselves. I mean, for a musician, for example, will make most of their income from touring, from the performances, and from the derivative products that they sell at those performances, the merchandise. We all love to be able to consume music almost freely anywhere we go, but that system is not sustainable for musicians. So the musicians need to, and the artists of all kinds and the creatives need to be placed at the center of a rebuilding, of a reset, of a new reset of how we think of the cultural ecosystem. Because of course, if you have no creation, if you have no artist, well, there's no festival, there's no stage. Even if you can come, there's no content to admire. So we need to continue to support a system that is more inclusive, that's more sustainable financially and in terms of the planet, but that does not forget that at the very heart of it is the artist.
And don't forget, you can catch up with all of our content on our website, cnnmoney.ch, and you can stay in touch with us via all of our social media platforms. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you next time.